Hidden Frequencies. Chapter 1. The Night Signal. The city of Hamburg was quiet under the weight of night, its streets dimly lit by scattered lamps and the distant glow of neon signs. Hannah Weiss sat alone in the control room of the small radio station where she worked. At 27, she had already built a reputation as a skilled radio engineer, someone who could repair broken transmitters and adjust frequencies with precision. Her life was simple, filled with long hours of technical work, but she carried inside her a restless curiosity. She often stayed late, long after the official broadcasts had ended, listening to the hum of machines and the endless rhythm of static. For her, the silence of the night was not empty. It was full of possibilities, as if the air itself carried secrets waiting to be discovered. That night in 1987, the air felt different. Hannah adjusted the dials of the receiver, searching for faint signals that sometimes drifted across the bands. She enjoyed the challenge of finding voices from far away, signals bouncing across the atmosphere, fragments of music or news from other countries. But what she heard was not familiar. A strange frequency appeared, one that did not belong to any known station. It was buried in static, yet it carried a pulse, a rhythm that seemed intentional. Hannah leaned closer, her eyes narrowing, her hands steady on the controls. Inside the noise she began to hear something more. It was not music, not a broadcast, but words. They were faint, broken, almost hidden, but they were there. It was as if someone was trying to send a secret message through the static. Her heart raced as she listened. The words were not clear, but they carried weight, like whispers from a distant place. Hannah felt a chill, not from fear but from recognition. She had studied radio waves for years, and she knew the difference between random interference and deliberate transmission. This was deliberate. Someone had chosen this frequency, someone had hidden their message inside the noise. She wondered who it could be and why they had chosen the night. The thought filled her with both excitement and unease. She realized that she had stumbled upon something unusual, something that did not belong to the routine of her work. Hannah sat back for a moment, her mind racing. She thought about her life, about the long hours she had spent surrounded by machines, about the quiet loneliness of her nights at the station. She had always believed that technology carried more than sound, that it carried stories, truths, and sometimes warnings. Now she felt that belief come alive. The signal was not only a technical anomaly. It was a message, and it was meant to be heard. She felt chosen, as if the night had placed this discovery in her hands. The responsibility weighed on her, but it also gave her strength. She knew she could not ignore it. Hannah Weiss worked late at the radio station. One night she caught a strange signal that did not belong to any known frequency. Inside the noise she heard words, as if someone was trying to send a secret message. The discovery became her turning point, teaching her that even in the silence of ordinary nights there could be hidden truths. She realized that curiosity was not only about finding answers but about listening carefully, about being ready to hear what others could not. The night signal was more than sound. It was the beginning of a journey, one that would test her courage and her belief in the unseen. Chapter 2. Curiosity of a Journalist. Daniel Kraus was 32 years old, a journalist who had spent most of his career chasing stories that others ignored. He was known in Hamburg for his persistence, for his ability to notice details that seemed unimportant to others but often revealed something larger. His life was not glamorous, and he lived in a small apartment filled with stacks of newspapers, notebooks, and half-finished articles. Yet he carried inside him a restless energy, a hunger for truth that never allowed him to rest. He believed that the city was full of secrets, hidden behind ordinary routines, and he had made it his mission to uncover them. When Daniel first heard about the strange signal, his curiosity grew instantly. He had always been fascinated by technology and by the way information could travel invisibly through the air. The idea that a hidden message was moving across the frequencies at night filled him with excitement. He believed it was more than a technical error. To him, it sounded like the beginning of a story that could change everything. He suspected that the signal was connected to secret experiments, perhaps carried out by groups who wanted to remain unseen. His instincts told him that the city was hiding something, and the signal was the first clue. Daniel's interest was not only professional but also personal. Years earlier, he had lost a close friend under mysterious circumstances. The official reports had explained it as an accident, but Daniel had never accepted that answer. He believed that there were forces in Hamburg that operated quietly, shaping events without leaving clear evidence. The strange signal seemed to confirm his suspicions. It was as if the city itself was speaking to him, offering a chance to uncover the truth he had been searching for. He felt that following the signal was not only about writing an article. It was about facing the questions that had haunted him for years. He began to investigate with determination. He spent nights listening to radios, adjusting frequencies, and searching for patterns in the noise. He visited libraries, reading about past experiments with sound and communication. He spoke with technicians and engineers, asking questions that made them uncomfortable. Slowly, he built a picture in his mind. The signal was not random. It was deliberate, and it carried meaning. Daniel felt both excitement and fear, because he understood that whoever was behind it did not want to be discovered. Yet he could not stop. His curiosity was stronger than caution, and his belief in hidden events pushed him forward. Daniel Kraus learned about the signal and decided to investigate. He believed it was connected to secret experiments. His interest was not only professional but also personal, because he suspected hidden events in the city. The discovery became his turning point, teaching him that curiosity was not only about finding answers but about facing risks. He realized that the search for truth demanded courage and that every clue carried responsibility. The signal was more than noise. It was a path into the unknown, and Daniel was ready to follow it, even if it meant confronting shadows that others preferred to ignore. Chapter 3. The Physicist's Secret. Dr. Lindner was a man who carried the weight of years of study in his eyes. At 58, he had spent most of his life surrounded by books, machines, and the quiet hum of laboratories. He was respected in Hamburg as a physicist who understood the hidden language of waves and signals. His office was filled with old papers, diagrams of frequencies, and radios that looked as if they belonged to another time. He had always believed that science was not only about numbers but about listening carefully to what the world tried to say. When Weiss and Daniel Kraus came to him with questions about the strange signal, he did not dismiss them. Instead, he listened with patience, his mind already connecting their discovery to things he had seen before. He explained that signals like the one Hannah had caught could sometimes be the result of experiments with radio waves. In the past, governments and research groups had tested ways to send information across unusual frequencies, hoping to reach further distances or to hide messages inside noise. But drive. Lindner also admitted that some signals carried information that normal science could not explain. He had studied patterns that seemed too deliberate to be accidents, messages that appeared inside static without any clear source. He told them that such signals were not only technical puzzles but also questions about human perception. They seemed to touch something deeper, something inside the mind. Dr. Lindner warned that these frequencies could affect the human mind in ways that were not yet understood. He had seen people who listened too long to strange signals become restless, unable to sleep, their thoughts filled with images they could not explain. He believed that the signals carried more than sound. They carried influence, shaping emotions and thoughts, sometimes even fears. He spoke calmly, but his words carried weight, and Hannah and Daniel felt the seriousness of his warning. The physicist was not trying to frighten them. He was trying to prepare them, to make them understand that curiosity could open doors that were difficult to close. Hannah listened carefully, her heart unsettled. She had always believed that technology was a tool, something neutral, something that could be controlled. But drive. Lindner's words made her realize that even simple waves could carry power beyond understanding. She thought about the night signal, about the hidden words inside the noise, and she wondered if they had already begun to affect her. Daniel felt the same unease, though his curiosity pushed him forward. He had always searched for hidden truths, but now he understood that the truth might come with danger. He respected drive. Lindner's knowledge, but he also felt that the warning was part of the story he needed to follow. Dr. Lindner explained that such signals could be the result of experiments with radio waves, but some of them carried information that normal science could not explain. He warned that these frequencies could affect the human mind. His lesson became clear to Hannah and Daniel. Science was not only about discovery but also about responsibility. The physicist's secret was not only the knowledge of signals but the understanding that every discovery carried risk. They realized that the strange frequency was more than a puzzle. It was a mirror, showing them the danger of curiosity without caution, and reminding them that the search for truth demanded strength of both mind and heart. Chapter 4. Deeper into the mystery. Hannah Weiss and Daniel Kraus began to meet almost every night, drawn together by the strange signal that had unsettled their lives. Hannah carried her small receiver with her, adjusting the dials with careful precision, while Daniel kept a notebook where he wrote down every fragment of sound, every broken word, and every strange pause in the transmission. The nights in Hamburg were cold, and the streets were often empty, but the two of them felt that the city was alive in a way they had never noticed before. The signal seemed to breathe through the air, pointing them toward places that carried hidden stories. They realized that the messages were not random. They were directions, guiding them to locations where strange events had already happened. The first place they visited was an abandoned apartment block near the harbor. The signal had repeated a series of numbers that matched the address. When they arrived, the building was silent, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. Yet the neighbors whispered about disappearances that had taken place there, people who had entered and never returned. Hannah felt uneasy as she listened to the faint hum of electricity still running through the wires, even though the building had been empty for years. Daniel wrote down every detail, convinced that the signal was exposing secrets that the city wanted to hide. He believed that the story was growing larger, and he felt both excitement and fear as he followed the clues. Another night, The signal led them to a factory that had burned down suddenly without clear cause. The ruins still smelled of smoke, and the ground was blackened with ash. Hannah noticed that the machines inside had failed in strange ways, as if they had been overloaded by something invisible. Daniel spoke with workers who remembered the fire, and they described lights flickering in the air before the flames began. Hannah listened carefully, realizing that the signal was not only pointing to places of destruction but also to places where energy had behaved unnaturally. She began to wonder if the frequencies carried more than words. Perhaps they carried influence, shaping events in ways that ordinary science could not explain. The deeper they went into the mystery, the more they felt the weight of the signal pressing against them. Hannah's nights grew longer, her eyes tired from listening, but her mind refused to rest. She was a radio engineer, trained to believe in logic and structure, yet the signal challenged everything she knew. Daniel, on the other hand, thrived on the tension. He was a journalist, and he believed that the truth was hidden in shadows. He felt that the signal was giving him the story he had always searched for, a story that could reveal the hidden forces shaping the city. Yet he also understood that the closer they came to the truth, the greater the risk became. Hannah and Daniel began listening every night. They noticed that the messages pointed to places in the city where strange events happened. Disappearances, sudden fires, and unexplained failures of machines. The mystery grew deeper, teaching them that curiosity was not only about discovery but also about responsibility. They realized that the signal was not only a puzzle but a mirror, showing them the dangers of ignoring hidden truths. The lesson of those nights was clear. The search for answers demanded courage, and every step into the unknown carried the weight of choice. Chapter 5. The Voice on Air. The nights in Hamburg grew heavier as Hannah Weiss and Daniel Kraus continued their search. Each evening they returned to the radio equipment, adjusting the dials and listening to the strange frequency that had unsettled their lives. At first the signal had been broken, filled with static and fragments of sound, but slowly it grew clearer. The noise began to fade, replaced by something more deliberate. A pattern formed, and then a voice appeared. It was not the voice of a normal broadcast, not the tone of a newsreader or a musician. It was calm, steady, and distant, as if it came from somewhere beyond the ordinary world. The words carried weight, speaking not of the present but of the future. The voice warned of disaster. It spoke of events that would come if people ignored the hidden signs. It described fires, failures, and disappearances, not as accidents but as consequences of neglect. Hannah listened with growing unease. She was a radio engineer, trained to believe in logic and structure, yet the voice seemed to bypass science and speak directly to her heart. She felt that the words were not general warnings but personal messages, directed at her alone. The thought unsettled her, but it also gave her a strange sense of responsibility. She wondered why the voice had chosen her, and what it expected her to do. Daniel reacted differently. As a journalist, he was drawn to the mystery, convinced that the voice was part of a larger story. He believed that the warnings were connected to secret experiments, perhaps carried out in hidden places across the city. He wrote down every word carefully, filling his notebook with notes and theories. He felt excitement, because the voice gave him the kind of story he had always searched for, a story that could reveal hidden truths. Yet he also felt fear, because the warnings were not abstract. They were specific, and they seemed to describe events that were already unfolding. Hannah's nights became restless. She could not sleep after hearing the voice, because the words echoed in her mind. She thought about the strange places the signals had pointed to, about the fires and disappearances, and she wondered if the voice was guiding her toward something she was meant to stop. She felt torn between her role as an engineer, someone who worked with machines, and her role as a listener, someone who carried the burden of meaning. The voice seemed to blur the line between technology and destiny, and Hannah realized that she could no longer separate the two. The signal grew clearer. A voice appeared, speaking about the future. It warned of disaster if people ignored the hidden signs. Hannah felt that the voice was speaking directly to her. The lesson of that night was clear. Sometimes messages are not only about sound but about responsibility. Hannah and Daniel realized that listening was not enough. They had to act, because the voice was not simply telling them what might happen. It was asking them to face the truth, to see the danger, and to decide whether they had the courage to respond. Chapter 6. Choice and Risk. The tension between Hannah Weiss and Daniel Kraus grew heavier with each passing night. The strange signal had become clearer, and the voice spoke with warnings that seemed more urgent, more direct. Daniel, with his restless energy and hunger for truth, believed that the information was the key to the biggest story of his career. He imagined headlines, public debates, and the exposure of hidden experiments that had been kept from the people of Hamburg. His notebook was filled with notes, theories, and possible connections, and he felt that the city was on the edge of revelation. For him, the risk was worth it, because the truth had to be told, no matter the cost. Hannah saw the situation differently. She was a radio engineer, trained to understand the delicate balance of signals and the way they could influence minds. She had listened carefully to the voice, and she felt that its warnings were not meant for public broadcast. They were too dangerous, too uncertain. She feared that if Daniel published the information, panic would spread across the city. People would not see the signals as a mystery to be studied but as proof of something uncontrollable. Hannah believed that the responsibility of knowledge was greater than the excitement of discovery. She carried the weight of caution, knowing that technology could shape emotions and fears in ways that were difficult to predict. Their arguments reflected their differences. Daniel spoke with passion, convinced that silence was a form of betrayal. Hannah answered with calm determination, reminding him that truth without responsibility could destroy more than it saved. They stood on opposite sides of the same mystery, each holding their own vision of what should be done. Yet beneath their conflict was a shared bond. They had both been changed by the signal, both drawn into its strange rhythm, and both aware that the voice was guiding them towards something final. They realized that the choice before them was not only about journalism or engineering. It was about courage, risk, and the future of the city itself. At last, they agreed to follow the last signal. It was not an easy decision, but it was the only path that allowed them to face the truth together. The voice had given them coordinates, a direction that led to the edge of Hamburg. The streets grew quieter as they walked, the lamps casting long shadows, the air colder with each step. Hannah carried her receiver, its faint hum guiding them forward, while Daniel held his notebook tightly, ready to record whatever they found. The signal grew stronger as they approached an old warehouse, its walls worn, its windows broken, its silence heavy with secrets. Daniel wanted to use the information for a big story, but Hannah understood it could cause panic. They argued, but finally decided to follow the last signal. It led them to an old warehouse at the edge of the city. The choice they made carried risk, but it also carried meaning. They realized that discovery was not only about finding answers but about facing responsibility. The warehouse stood before them like a test, waiting to reveal whether they had the strength to balance truth with caution. The lesson of that night was clear. Every choice carried risk, and only those who faced it with honesty could hope to find light in the shadows. Chapter 7. Resolution. The warehouse stood silent at the edge of Hamburg, its walls heavy with dust and forgotten years. Hannah Weiss stepped inside first, her careful eyes scanning the shadows. She was 27, a radio engineer who had spent her life surrounded by machines, yet what she saw here unsettled her more than broken wires or faulty transmitters ever could. The air was thick with the hum of hidden energy, and in the center of the room stood equipment that looked both familiar and strange. Old transmitters, amplifiers, and tangled cables had been arranged in a way that made the entire space feel alive, as if the machines themselves were breathing. The faint signal that had haunted her nights seemed to pulse from this place, filling the silence with invisible weight. Daniel Kraus followed close behind, his notebook pressed against his chest. At 32 he had chased many stories, but none had carried the same sense of danger and importance as this one. His journalist's instinct told him that this was the heart of the mystery, the place where the strange signals had been born. He imagined headlines and articles, but as he looked at the machines, he felt something deeper. The voice that had spoken through the air was not a simple broadcast. It was a reflection of something human, something hidden inside fear and uncertainty. Daniel realized that the story was not about exposing a secret experiment alone. It was about understanding the way technology could magnify emotions and turn them into something powerful. Dr. Lindner arrived soon after, his calm presence steadying the tension in the room. At 58 he had seen many experiments, some successful, some dangerous, and he recognized immediately what had happened here. He explained that the equipment had been designed to amplify signals and send them into the air, but the experiment had grown beyond control. The frequencies had begun to interact with human minds, shaping thoughts and fears, turning them into the voice that Hannah and Daniel had heard. It was not magic, not supernatural, but a mirror of human weakness, made stronger by the machines. His words carried weight, and both Hannah and Daniel understood that the danger was not in the equipment itself, but in the way it had been used. Hannah felt the truth settle inside her. She realized that the power of the signal was not in its mystery but in its ability to force people to see themselves. The voice had spoken of disaster, but it had only repeated what already lived inside human fear. She understood that if the equipment continued to operate, it would keep feeding those fears, spreading panic and confusion across the city. Her hands trembled as she approached the machines, but her decision was clear. She destroyed the equipment, cutting wires, breaking circuits, and silencing the hum that had filled the warehouse. The air grew lighter, the tension faded, and the voice dissolved into silence. Daniel watched her with respect. He had wanted a story, something dramatic to publish, but now he understood that the real story was not about sensation. It was about the lesson hidden inside the signals. Technology was powerful, but its danger came from the way people used it. He realized that honesty and responsibility were stronger than fear, and that the truth was not in headlines but in the choices people made. As they left the warehouse, Daniel carried no notes about machines or experiments. Instead, he carried the lesson that courage was not about exposing secrets but about protecting others from harm. Inside the warehouse they found equipment that amplified signals and sent them into the air. Dr. Lindner explained that it was an experiment out of control. The voice was a reflection of human fears, made stronger by the frequencies. Hannah realized that the power of the signal was not magic but the way it forced people to see the truth about themselves. She destroyed the equipment to stop the influence. Daniel understood that the real story was not about sensation but about the lesson. Moral: the real danger is not in technology itself but in how people use it. Only honesty and responsibility can protect against darkness born from fear. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.